You think you know a story, but then a case like this comes along. You've got a decorated Boston police officer found dead in a snowbank. And then you have his girlfriend, Karen Reed, who's charged with his murder. But what happened next was anything but a simple trial. It was a full-blown battle between two totally different realities. In one version, a drunken argument turns fatal. In the other, an innocent woman is framed by a corrupt system. This is the case that literally fractured a community and had the whole country watching. It pitted one woman against a wall of law enforcement, all to answer a single brutal question. What really happened to John O'Keefe? Okay, so before we get into the theories, which are, let's just say, worlds apart, we need to lay down the groundwork. Let's talk about the very few facts that both sides, the prosecution and the defense, actually agree on. So this is basically the skeleton of that night. It starts at a bar, totally normal, and then it ends, hours later, with a frantic 911 call in the middle of a blizzard. That's when Karen Reed, with her friends Jen McCabe and Carrie Roberts, made that absolutely horrifying discovery. And let's be clear about who we're talking about here. John O'Keefe was a beloved officer, a 16-year veteran. He was also a father figure, the guardian for his late sister's kids. Now, the medical examiner's findings are stark. He died from a combination of blunt force trauma and hypothermia. The central mystery is so simple but so profound. How did he end up injured and freezing to death on that lawn? All right, let's dive into the first version of this story. This is the one presented by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and they argue that this was a classic, tragic case of domestic violence turned deadly. The prosecution, well, they painted a pretty damning picture. They said the relationship was falling apart. They pointed to those angry, jealous voicemails Karen left after she dropped John off. Then came the physical evidence. Pieces of her broken taillight found at the scene, a single hair consistent with John's DNA on her SUV's bumper. They also had data showing her SUV backing up at 24 miles per hour. And to top it all off, they claimed multiple first responders heard her confess right there at the scene. This, right here, was the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. They brought a paramedic to the stand who said he heard Karen Reed repeat this over and over in the chaos of that morning. They argued she admitted her guilt in her own words just moments after John's body was found. So that's the prosecution's story of jealous rage. The defense, though, they came back with a narrative that was so radically different, it's hard to believe it's about the same case. They argued Karen Reed was innocent and was actually the target of a massive conspiracy designed to protect the real killer. And this is where it gets wild. A single Google search became a digital battleground. The prosecution says that at 6:23 a.m., after they found the body, Jen McCabe searched for hypothermia info. But the defense brought in experts who testified that the search, "How long to die in cold," was actually made at 2:27 a.m. That's nearly 4 hours before anyone supposedly even knew John was missing. This one search became a digital smoking gun for both sides. The defense then started chipping away at the state's timeline with other witnesses. They brought in a snowplow driver who swore he cleared that exact street around 2:45 a.m. and saw no body on the lawn. Another person leaving the party testified that they saw Karen's SUV earlier in the night and there was absolutely no damage to the taillight. And then the defense shifted its focus squarely onto the investigation itself, specifically onto the lead investigator, State Trooper Michael Proctor. Why? Well, it came out that he had close personal ties to the family who owned the house where the party took place. Suddenly, the investigator was on trial. During the investigation, Trooper Proctor sent this text message about Karen Reed to some of his friends. The defense jumped all over it, presenting it as undeniable proof of his bias against the very woman he was supposed to be impartially investigating. And it didn't stop there. This is a text Proctor sent while he was supposed to be searching Karen Reed's phone for evidence. I mean, it's shocking. His conduct was so outrageous that it actually sparked an internal affairs investigation, which just poured fuel on the defense's fire that this whole thing was a corrupt, biased setup. So the defense's theory was this: the real crime happened inside the house. They suggested John got into a fight and that injuries on his arm could have even come from the homeowner's German Shepherd. Then they argued his body was moved outside, and investigators planted the taillight pieces and manipulated video evidence, all to frame Karen Reed. So, after a trial that was just sensational, I mean, it really felt like a true crime documentary playing out in real time, with protesters on the courthouse steps and testimony that shocked everyone. The case finally went to the jury.
And the conclusion? It was stunning. A verdict that absolutely reverberated across the country.
Not guilty on all counts. She was acquitted of second-degree murder, manslaughter, and leaving the scene of a fatal accident. Outside the courthouse, the sea of free Karen Reed supporters just erupted. For them, it was proof that justice had prevailed. But the verdict didn't bring any peace. John O'Keefe's family was devastated. They called it a gross miscarriage of justice. For them, a killer walked free. But for Karen Reed supporters, it was a massive triumph. Proof that one person could fight back against a flawed system and actually win. You see, the acquittal answered the legal question. Was Karen Reed guilty beyond a reasonable doubt? And the jury said no. But it left the most important, the most human question just hanging in the air. It created this unsettling void right where the truth should be. Because the verdict didn't solve the crime. It just created a brand new mystery. The trial of Karen Reed is over. But for a grieving family and a divided community, the chilling question remains, what really happened on that snowy night in Canton?